about splitting into two different websites for Canada, another for the US. We want to make sure we have the best site structure for SEO. Want to revisit what we recommended and review.
I remember talking about this before.
So give us an update on the client. And we're recording this, so you may not want to share that client's URL, but we can pause it if you need to.
So real briefly, so the background is their site in Canada, but it's using .com. And people from the US, people from Canada, they see different prices. They see all the same stuff, but they see different prices, and sometimes some products are inquire, other times they have a price. And then we've only got one thing on there where it's detecting the IP address, basically one thing on there where it's like a phone number, which phone number to call. But now we want to split the sites up into Canada and US versions. So when we had talked about it before, and we did some of our own research, and we came up with the basic recommendation of based on the sales of the site, we wanted to keep the .com as the Canadian version and make a US version of .us, because they were getting like 3 times as many sales in Canada as the US. And talking to them, and Brian, jump in if I'm incorrect, and talking to them, I don't imagine that's going to change anytime soon. Right. And they've got 2 locations in Canada, 2 in the US. But for now, it's not like there's going to be a location specific store. It's going to be country specific. And within the country specific store, then it handles the different locations as far as checking out inventory and stuff like that. So yeah, we had recommended doing .com for US and for Canada, and .us for USA. However, the last time we talked to them, they were thinking, well, to do it more like maybe a bigger company where it's like Hewlett Packard, for example. There's a hewlettpackard.com, and then underneath that, the shops there's a Canadian shop and a US shop. They're not changing any of the TLD, or they don't change .us or .com. It's just .com, but they direct them to a different installation. But my guess is that at this point, HP's done that a lot. It's that way been that way for a long time, and they've got their SEO squared away. So from an SEO perspective, at this point, I mean, is what should be our best recommendation? Because we had looked at most of the traffic. Most of the traffic is still Canadian. And Brian, did I sum all that up pretty well?
Yeah, I guess. But I'll just wait for David's response. Yeah, but basically, we're trying to split it to we'll try to split it into 2 websites, and then the Canadian website would be a multilingual site, basically, if I understand. Yeah, like right, Dave.
Yeah,
so that's where.
But that's
the language question is.
Yeah, I don't want to confuse that issue. We'll deal with that in the second one. But so really the options are, so there's the e-commerce, and then we've got blogs on the site as well. So you can do 3 different sites: the .com, which is all the information. You can do .us and .ca for the shops.
Right. Okay. So let's keep these issues separate. So first of all, despite your recommendation, they want one site with different subdirectories based on the country.
Well, they were looking at some other folks, and I don't think that they are convinced with our response at this point.
Yeah. So I think it's important to remember that with even with like HP or big companies, worldwide companies, like we don't know because we don't see their analytics, the implications of their choice when it comes to SEO. And frankly, HP probably doesn't depend on SEO a whole lot, right? In fact, I'd even go so far to say is that SEO teams on Fortune 500 companies usually aren't that great. Sorry, Fortune 500 companies. It's just, there's so much fighting and things to consider. They don't usually even get to implement what they want to recommend because SEO is kind of usually pushed to the side as a secondary thought. I say this because I have some friends who work at IBM SEO, and they fight hard for the recommendations and never get implemented. So the site is kind of cobbled together and is not built in light of best practices for SEO because, well, the development team just thinks they want to do this, and the paid search team wants to do that, and the marketing team's working from an SEO playbook that's 20 years old. And, it's just, don't go with, if it's good enough for HP, it's good enough for us, because they might be really hurting. They might get minuscule SEO stuff. They might be doing it right. But the point is, we have no access to analytics to know. So in light of that whole competitive from what you can see from the outside isn't a great case. Now, the advantage of what they're doing is that both the Canadian and the US site would benefit from the strength of the existing .com. We're not starting from scratch on a .us, right? Because so they'd all benefit. And this is where we maybe bring in the language component to this, because what you could do is use the language tags within the site to tell Google, this is French Canadian, this is Spanish, this is English US, this is English. I don't know if there's English CA or there's an English UK.
Yeah.
So you could use language tags within one big domain to distinguish to Google, serve this page to the speakers of this language. And so that helps Google to say, okay, there's a French query, I'm going to send it to the French Canadian section of the site, and they all benefit from it.
So regarding at this point, and again, Brian, correct me if I'm wrong, at this point, they want French and Spanish, but it's not to where there's any auto detection, or I think that they just want the capability to show it in French or Spanish. In other words, you could click a button and it would do that.
So if you do that, understand that Google will not serve the page in a search result to a Spanish speaker.
Yeah.
Right.
Because it's auto-generated.
Yeah.
Right.
And because the Google can't push a button to say, hey, I want to see it in Spanish, you have to use the language tags and have a static version of the site. So, that is to have it automatically generate in Spanish, to say, oh, I want to see it in Spanish, assumes that you could read English in order to select the button and read it in Spanish. And you knew enough English to search for the product in English and be like, oh, I'd like to see this in Spanish. Now, in French-speaking Canada, it might not be as much of a problem, but if you are a native, if you speak Spanish natively, you might not know some of these particular products and how they're named in English to search for it. Having a Spanish-speaking site would be wonderful, but you have to be able to get there, right? And that means you have to be aware of this company and say, oh, I know this is the place I want to get that product. Go there and say, oh, good, I can read this in Spanish. Click on that thing, right? It makes a lot of assumptions about how they found you, and that might work. If they're a big enough brand and well-established in their industry, people might just by default go to their website and say, great, and now they can click the Spanish and read the Spanish stuff. But don't think you can do SEO for Spanish speakers on some button that automatically translates that.
Right.
Besides the quality of an automatic translation, right? So that all plays into this. So it is now when it comes to implementation, like I have not done this on a WordPress website. I don't know if there are plugins or whatever that adds language tags to websites to generate, so you can say, here's the Spanish version of the website, go to that page, right? It probably is, or you might be end up coding something specific.
Right.
But this is a real complicated process that
Right.
I think the client would be cheaper and simpler, and the client would be happier with a website based in the United States and a website based in Canada, which is what you're recommending. I agree with you. You could create separate sections of the website and try to focus them, but then you run into duplicate content problems because you're running an English Canadian site and an English US site. Canadians speak US English, it's not even, they may be more similar. They might do OUR for color like the English do, but like,
right.
My guess, so at this point, and Brian, you again, correct me if I'm wrong, my guess is at this point is they are like maybe it's not the best analogy, but they're like when you're really hungry and you go to a buffet and you pile everything on your plate and you just can't eat it all. Right. My guess is they want to do all this stuff, but then from their perspective, to be able to support it, to say, oh, we got to, make sure when we do this new product, add it on and change the description. We got to find somebody to do Spanish, or how do we automatically do that? They can't even, it takes a lot of effort for them to just review a freaking blog post, right? So this is just it. They're just, from a company perspective at this point, I think they're just going to have to live with some of that automatic translation stuff.
Right.
And
it adds,
live with it. Right. That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah. But it I think what adds to the complexity is we've never really thought about what David mentioned about the search thingy.
That's right.
So if you have like an automated translation using a script, it wouldn't affect the search, because searches relies on the database. So if it's like someone searches for orange in Spanish, it doesn't exist in the database, it wouldn't really result to anything.
You're talking internal search.
Complicated. Yeah. Because if like for an e-commerce site, that's why most e-commerce sites has a search, because that's one of the the functionalities that users use the most, right? Like when you shop for something, you search for it using the search bar.
That's a good point.
So if you see the site has the capability of showing a French content, you would assume that the search would be able to understand what you're looking for as well in French. So that's not gonna be fun for the user, I guess. It'll be like you would end up having disappointed customers. I don't know.
Yeah, Brian, that's a great point. I've totally forgot about the internal search.
Good point. Yeah, agreed.
All right. Well, we can bring all the thing is we can bring all these complications up to them, and they're going to be overwhelmed, and they're like, I just wanted somebody to be able to read the site in Spanish. That's all I wanted as a convenience.
Well, so you can go into Google Analytics and you can see how many people who have Spanish as a language set on their browser, or French as a language set on their browser, and give them data to say, you know what, 1% of your visitors have a browser set to Spanish.
Right.
So because this isn't going to help you get more of them, because it's not automatic generated, you're only helping 1% of your visitors. Now, I imagine in Canada, the French version would be a lot greater.
That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense.
Right. So you can show the data, the implications, right? We're not going to grow your Spanish audience with this. This is just helping your existing audience who happens to speak Spanish.
Well,
So
I'm then thinking if it's such a small number of people who have their browser set to that language, it's like, guys, do you really want to make these changes for such a small percentage? Is it really worth it?
right.
Because we add a plugin, we add some code, we do those kind of things, it's going to slow the site down a little bit. That's not good.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
You know, and, I mean, it just reminds me how much of SEO is client management. You know,
Well,
yeah, right. And part of me is like, okay, price it out and say, okay, to do this is how much it's going to cost. And when they see this isn't a simple like add a plugin kind of thing, they might be like, oh, for 1% of our traffic, and you know, you'll even be able to see how much of your conversions come from Spanish speaking browsers. Oh, we couldn't pay for that in 6 months and 12 months, you know. So there could be some role of, you know, you almost give them the go away price.
that's a good point.
You know, hey, you know, we can do this. It's going to cost X times the number of the website because we're doing all this. And by the way, we wouldn't recommend this based on the ROI, we can already tell from the site.
Yeah, I think that's the best approach. So we'll look at the analytics and see if we can find the data.
Data always helps.
Yeah, that was really, really helpful.
Okay, good.